In this video, we're going to learn a little bit more about this idea of a priori knowledge to see, because it's important and we want to see how it's going to fit into Descartes' project to understand how we can have all the knowledge that we do have, and in particular all the scientific knowledge that we do have and can go on to acquire if we don't have it yet. So, we're in meditation 2. Descartes has argued that, or claimed, he can know, I exist, I think, I wonder whether I'm deceived by an evil genius, and all sorts of other facts about his mind. This is what we call a priori knowledge. It's knowledge that we have without relying on sensory perception for evidence. It involves maybe something like pure reasoning or introspection. Descartes thinks of it as inspection of ideas, and he talks about what is known by the natural light. This is the light of awareness and reasoning by which you can know that right now you're hearing a voice. That you seem to be hearing a voice, that it's as if you're hearing a voice. Now, it's controversial if any knowledge is a priori. Locke thought almost none was, and if so, how much is? And Descartes thought that a lot was. And so, the examples we've seen so far, I exist, that's nice, but it's not a lot of knowledge. And so we might wonder, well, is other knowledge a priori, and how is Descartes going to get us to knowledge of the physical world? So we'll see that right now, there are a lot of examples of possible a priori knowledge. These are all contested, both whether or not they're a priori knowledge, whether or not they're a priori, and whether or not they're known at all. But we're going to give some examples just to get the sense of what might be in play here. So you might think that truths of logic are a priori. So if the Lakers win the NBA championships in 2021, then the Lakers win the NBA championships in 2021. Well, it's hard to see how that could be false, right? There's no possible counterexample to that. For that to be false, the if part would have to be true, and then the then part would have to be false. How could that happen? If the if part is true, the Lakers win the NBA championships in 2021, then also the then part has to be true, and so there's no way that that could be false. Consider the second one. Either the Lakers will win the championships this year, or they won't. Well, one of those two things is going to happen. It certainly seems like it has to happen. And so these seem like they're true. They seem like they have to be true. But also, it's not clear that you need any evidence, sensory evidence for them. They happen to concern the Lakers, and so maybe you need to know who the Lakers are, and that involves but you don't actually need you don't need to know who the Lakers are. That's the point, is it's no special facts about the Lakers or their championship or anything like that you need to know in order to see that these are true. You just need to understand what or and if mean, arguably, in order to know that these are true. And if it's just that understanding of what if and or mean, then it's not clear how you're relying on any sensory evidence at all to know that these two claims are both true. Mathematics. So arguably lots of mathematics is a priori. There is no greatest number. There is no greatest prime number. How could you don't know these are, you know these by doing proofs, not by investigating the world. Indeed, I would argue that it's very plausible that 1 + 1 = 2 is a priori, that actually, you know that that's true by understanding what 1 and 2 and plus mean, that 2 is the first number after 1, and that +1 means something like the first number after the other number. And so by knowing how plus and 1 and 2 work, what they are, you know that that's true. You don't actually have to do any investigation. That's more involved, and you don't need to agree with me right now, and there's more to be said about it that we don't have time to say right now, but I'd actually think, I'm pretty confident that you do not need and cannot actually get sensory evidence for the truth of that. What about geometry? Well, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, the Pythagorean theorem, the longest side, if you have a right triangle, the longest side, the square of its length is equal to the sum of the squares of the other two sides, their lengths. Or if you have an angle, can you, using just a ruler and compass, divide that angle into 3 even parts? And can you do that with every angle? Answer, no. How do we know these things? Well, we do proofs. We don't do experiments. Is the basic idea. And Descartes thinks, it's by inspecting our ideas of space and line and point and so on, and inspecting our ideas of number, that we can see all of these different truths to be true. Now, in Meditations 2, Descartes doesn't focus on those examples. In the second half of Meditations 2, he gives the example of the wax. And he says, look, we can come to know that bodies are extended, that they take up space, that they're flexible, that their shape can change, and that they're otherwise changeable, that they can be, for example, moved around, and that lots of their other qualities can change. I've put a picture of wax here changing, right, with a candle burning, changing from, actually solid to both liquid and gas. But actually this is completely misleading because for Descartes, you don't know that the wax is extended or flexible. Or you don't know that in general the wax can undergo changes, that it's extended and flexible and changeable by watching it change. Actually, you can know this by inspecting your idea of wax, and more generally by inspecting your idea of a body. The particular kinds of changes that wax can undergo and when it can undergo them, that, if you heat it, it will change in these ways. That would, if you were going to know that would require sensory perception. But to know that a body is extended and flexible and changeable for Descartes, that's not from your sense perception or memory or imagination. It's from your inspection, your rational inspection of your idea of the wax. And so Descartes thinks that even knowledge of these very general physical principles, that is itself a priori, relying on reason, and not, as you might have thought, on sensory perception. Is he right about that? Well, we could talk a lot about that. We don't have time at this point. So at this point in Meditations, Descartes has claimed, I can know that I exist, and argued that a bunch of opinions, how do we come to them? Well, whether or not they're knowledge, we come to them by inspecting our ideas and not by sense perception. But there's a question, right? Maybe the ideas we have, say, of wax or of body or of number or of space and line and point, maybe those are somehow inaccurate ideas, that an evil genius has installed into us bad ideas of space and line and point and body and so on. And so sure, we can inspect the ideas, but when we do so, we're inspecting faulty ideas, and so any reasoning we use is going to be mistaken. And at this point in the Meditations, Descartes hasn't explained why inspection of ideas would actually lead to any accurate beliefs. And so at this point, actually, while I gave those as examples of a priori knowledge, Descartes has not shown that they're knowledge because he hasn't shown that they're certain. And we might wonder how confident we should be that they're a priori. But Descartes has at least given us some reason to think that maybe they are. So at the end of Meditation 2, we can know our own existence and our own minds. Descartes thinks we can know our own ideas, and that all of that knowledge would be a priori from reason and independent of sense experience. And it's supposed to give us knowledge of geometry and arithmetic, but we haven't really seen how it would, because we think we might worry maybe an evil genius could install into our minds, for example, inaccurate ideas. So still, there's a lot that Descartes has to do to get us to knowledge of geometry and arithmetic and physics and of the physical world in general. And so we have more to do, and we'll see what he does in subsequent meditations in our next video.